So today is we're backing onto Mental Health Awareness Week, and we're going to hear from Theodora Popescu, who's a psychologist with Psych Health, on the role of trauma and healing in mental wellness.
Hello, everyone. I know that everyone's probably joining from, not necessarily everyone, but people are joining from different time zones. So I'll say good afternoon, good morning, hello. My name is Theodora, and I'm a psychologist with Psych Health. Today, we're going to be talking about trauma and the role it can play in mental wellness, how it may show up in everyday life, and what healing can look like. Trauma is something that affects far more people than we often realize. And sometimes people are aware that they have experienced trauma, and other times they simply notice that they're struggling emotionally, physically, or mentally without fully understanding why. So, one of the goals for today's presentation is to help create greater understanding and compassion, both for ourselves and others around us. This presentation is not about diagnosing or asking anyone to revisit any painful experiences. We are more so wanting to increase awareness and normalize common responses to stress and trauma. Also, before getting into anything, I want to acknowledge that some of the topics discussed today may resonate personally with people listening. So please take care of yourself during the presentation in whatever way feels right for you. So, what is trauma? When people hear the word trauma, we may often think about one major event, something extreme or life-threatening. But trauma can actually be much broader and more complex than that. Trauma is not about the event itself. It's about the impact that experience has on our nervous system, the body, emotions, beliefs, and the person's overall ability to cope. Trauma can present in different ways. We have a few different types of trauma that we'll get into. So the first is acute trauma, and this refers to a one-off stressful or dangerous experience. Things like a car accident or natural disaster, medical emergency, assault, for example. And these experiences may overwhelm a person's sense of safety and can sometimes lead to symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress. Then we have chronic trauma, and this refers to ongoing exposure to stress or unsafe situations over a long period of time. So we can think of this as a compounded type of trauma. So things like ongoing bullying, racism, chronic illness, family conflict, neglect, living in unstable or unsafe environments. And chronic trauma can gradually wear down a person's emotional resilience and nervous system as it happens over time. The other type of trauma is complex trauma, and this generally involves repeated or prolonged traumatic experiences. These often happen within close relationships or during childhood and developmental years. And these include childhood abuse or emotional neglect, domestic violence, or repeated exposure to unsafe environments. With complex trauma, it can deeply affect a person's emotional regulation, relationships, and self-worth. We also talk about vicarious trauma, which can affect people who are regularly exposed to the distress of others, through caregiving or support roles. This is particularly relevant for healthcare workers, for first responders, mental health workers. One important thing to remember is that trauma is highly individual. So two people can go through the exact same event, but their experiences and responses may be completely different. One person may cope relatively well, while another may feel deeply impacted. And this is why we often say that trauma is not about the event, but it's about the impact that the experience has on that person. How trauma shows up. Trauma does not always look dramatic or obvious, especially in cases where it's not compounded, where it's a one-off experience. And sometimes it can show up very quietly in everyday life. And many people don't initially recognize these experiences or these traumatic responses. And one of the main reasons why it can be confusing to notice it is because it's things like difficulty sleeping or, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, having, irritability, not a great sense of patience, concentration even, or, constantly feeling on edge. Some physical symptoms include tension, fatigue, headaches, or feeling disconnected from others. Sometimes people even describe feeling like they can never truly relax. And others may notice that they become highly reactive to situations that seem small on the surface. And in a way, people begin to blame themselves for these responses. Kind of like, you know, why am I reacting like this? It's such a small issue. Or, why can't I switch off? Why can't I, fall asleep at night without thinking about things? Why do I feel exhausted all the time? And it's important to understand that these responses are often not signs of weakness or failure. They're often signs that the nervous system has adapted to survive stress and threat. Our nervous system is designed to protect us and keep us alive. When we perceive danger or stress, our bodies automatically shift into survival responses. These responses happen on an unconscious level, so it's not like we're choosing consciously to go and do these responses. And you might have heard of fight, flight, or freeze. In terms of the fight response, this may look like anger, frustration, irritability, or emotional outbursts. Then flight responses may look like overworking or perfectionism, or staying constantly busy and avoiding situations that, maybe are hard to think about. Freeze responses may look like shutting down emotionally or disconnecting, feeling numb, stuck, or unable to respond even. And it's important to realize that they're not character flaws. It's simply our adaptive survival responses that were developed by our nervous system to keep us safe. We also talk about something that's called window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance refers to the emotional zone where a person is regulated enough to think clearly, communicate effectively, and cope with stress. So when someone is within their window of tolerance, they're generally able to function and regulate emotions more effectively. However, when we have stress or trauma that pushes us outside that window, we may move into hyperarousal, which can feel like anxiety, panic, overwhelmed, anger, more so our fight symptoms. Then we have hyperarousal, which may feel like numbness or disconnection or, shutting down emotionally. And trauma can narrow a person's window of tolerance. This sort of means that even smaller stresses can feel overwhelming for our nervous system. And we're just going to be going through a video now in terms of trauma. It's by an author that wrote The Body Keeps the Score.
The most important thing to know is that there's a difference between trauma and stress. As I like to say to people, life sucks a good amount of the time. We all have jobs and situations that are really unpleasant. But the moment that the situation is over, it's over. The problem with trauma is that when it's over, your body continues to relive it. My name is Bessel van der Kolk. I'm a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I got interested in trauma on my first day working at the Veterans Administration. 1978 was the year, and the Vietnam War was over by about 6 or 7 years. The very first day that I met Vietnam veterans, I was just blown away. These were guys who were my age, who were clearly smart and competent and athletic, and they clearly were just a shadow of their former self. Their bodies were clearly affected by trauma, and they had a very hard time connecting with new people after the war. Around that time, a group of us started to define what trauma is, and in the definition of PTSD, we write, these people have been exposed to an extraordinary event that is outside of normal human experience. And in retrospect, that shows us how ignorant and narrow-minded we were, because it turned out that this is not an unusual experience at all. People usually think about the military when they talk about trauma, but at least 1 out of 8 kids in America witness physical violence between their parents. A larger number of kids get beaten very hard by their own caregivers. A very large number of people in general, but women in particular, have sexual experiences that were clearly unwanted and that left them confused and enraged. So, unlike what we first thought, trauma is actually extremely common. There's a lot of debate of what a trauma is to this day. But basically, trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so upset that it overwhelms you. There is nothing you can do to stave off the inevitable. You basically collapse in a state of confusion, maybe rage, because you are unable to function in the face of this particular threat. But the trauma is not the event that happens, the trauma is how you respond to it. One of the largest mitigating factors against getting traumatized is who is there for you at that particular time. When, as a kid, you get bitten by a dog, it's really very scary and very nasty. But if your parents pick you up and say, "Oh, I see that you're really in bad shape, let me help you," that dog bite doesn't become a big issue because the foundation of your safety has not been destroyed. We are profoundly interdependent people, and as long as our relationships are intact, by and large, we're pretty good with trauma. It's a subjective experience, and what may be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me, depending on our personality and our prior experiences. The problem with trauma is that it starts off with something that happens to us, but that's not where it stops, because it changes your brain. Much of the imprint of trauma is in that very primitive survival part of your brain that I like to call the cockroach brain. There's a part of you that just picks up what's dangerous and what's safe. And when you're traumatized, that little part of your brain, which is usually very quiet, continues to just send messages. I'm in danger. I'm not safe. That event itself is over, but you continue to react to things as if you're in danger. We're talking about survival. We're talking about staying alive. And so some people go into fight-flight, or on a more primitive level, people's brain shuts down and they collapse. You have these automatic responses that are not a product of your cognitive assessment, they're a product of your animal brain trying to stay alive in the face of something that part of your brain interprets as a life threat. And the problem then becomes that you are not able to engage, or to learn, or to see other people's point of view, or to coordinate your feelings with your thinking. Traumatized people have a tremendous problem experiencing pleasure and joy. But the core issue is our hormones and our physiological impulses that have to do with survival. Your body keeps mobilizing itself to fight. You have all kinds of immunological abnormalities, endocrine abnormalities, and that really devastates your physical health also. Oftentimes the physical problems are longer lasting than the mental problems. And the other thing that is terribly important is the impact of poverty, or the impact of racism, or the impact of unemployment. There's other societies that are much more trauma savvy than we are, where there is not an enormous amount of income inequality. Healthcare is universal, childcare is universal. A culture like that really looks at what are the antecedents for certain forms of pathology. So the big issue is a political issue. How do we rearrange our society to really know about trauma so that people who grow up under extreme adverse conditions can become full-fledged members of society? The sense of community and people being there for each other is a critical part of surviving and thriving.
Get smarter faster with new videos every week from the world's biggest thinkers.
Wait, you're on mute, Theo.
My bad. So I'm just going to open up some space to answer any questions. I can understand that it could have been a lot of information to take in at once. So if there's any questions, you can pop it into the chat or feel free to ask. Otherwise, we will have questions at the end as well. Maybe we'll give it a minute. Alex, is that okay?
Yeah, look, I think keep charging ahead. It's fascinating stuff, and I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions.
Yeah, Alex, sorry, this is Shinyang, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I thought that this is something I have as a doubt. So when you talk about trauma, the chronic part of it, will you classify like in the work environment, people talk about burnout as a kind of a trauma that you experience? Because this is something that while you don't see it out on the surface, but you notice it quite fairly kind of common frequency. So how would you classify burnout?
Sorry, I missed the last part of that question, Jinyoung.
No, so how do you relate burnout as a kind of trauma that someone experiences?
Yeah, so with burnout, I mean it can be related because it's mostly related to stress. And when we have compounded stress, which is stress from different areas of our lives, it can lead to burnout in the workplace. Because I mean, stress is good. It ensures we meet our deadlines and we get our work done on time. But when it becomes chronic and it's constantly there, it can create a sense of trauma as well, which then can, in the long term, contribute to that burnout aspect.
So I guess it's just a case of terminology, but I guess it's not that important that classify whether it's a trauma or not. But because I think trauma usually we associate with like a one-off event like you described, and those chronic one is a accumulation of things over years or many years. And therefore, yeah. So the thing I relate to is more like a burnout kind of thing. So I guess there's no clear definition in that case.
But then there are cases where the burnout is actually going to depression and become suicidal.
Yeah. So the question is, there are people with burnout symptom or a burnout kind of feeling. It will go to depression, and then after that, it becomes suicidal. Yeah, kind of. So I guess it's a different thing altogether, or it's also related to trauma that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, so it like earlier on, no two people are the same. So it just depends on the experiences that person's had, the resilience that they have, what kind of protective factors they have in place. Are they seeking support? Do they have people at home that can speak to? So there's no definitive answer. I would say it's case by case.
And Chin Young, if I can just jump in here, that's really where you need to reach out, talk to someone like Theo, and she can help define what you're actually going through, and provide some tools and techniques to build resilience and to help you through that. So that's the important thing, is as early as possible, upstream as much as possible, to reach out and have a chat.
All right, got it. Any other thing? All right, thank you.
Not a problem. So we're just going to be moving in a little bit into tools that can assist us in these instances. So one of the most important things that I want people to take away from today is that healing is possible. So it doesn't mean that we're forgetting what happened. It does not mean that, pretending difficult experiences or situations didn't occur. But healing involves helping our nervous system feel safe again, feel safe again to reconnect, to regulate, to, engage with life more fully. Healing often begins with safety, and this includes safe relationships, emotional support, stable routines, being in an environment where, you feel safe and understood. So learning regulation skills is also an important part of healing. These regulation tools include things like grounding strategies or breathing strategies, mindfulness, emotional awareness, movement, for example. Understanding our experiences can also be incredibly powerful. When people begin to understand why their body and mind are responding in certain ways, negative emotions often start to decrease. So we're not necessarily just feeling symptoms. We actually have a foundation, an understanding of why, my heart starts beating fast when I get nervous or stressed, or, why I get, sweaty hands, or these are the reasons. This is the foundation of, I guess, healing. Another important thing is using evidence-based strategies to support trauma recovery. These approaches include CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and committance therapy, somatic therapies. And these can help process experiences, the situations that occurred. It can help regulate our emotions. It can help rebuild within ourselves. Next. Yeah. So I want to include a few simple tools that people can use every day. And these are not about fixing emotions. They're about helping regulate our nervous system and creating those small moments of safety and grounding. We're just going to be going through these exercises together, so feel free to join in if you're comfortable. I'll guide everyone through it. So the first one is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. And this grounding exercise is extremely useful during anxiety, overwhelm, or when thoughts start spiraling. It helps us come back to the present moment. So we're just going to start off with name 5 things that you can see. And now 4 things that you can touch. 3 things that you can hear. 2 things that you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. So the goal of this exercise is to reconnect the mind and the body to here and now. Then we have our next exercise, box breathing. And box breathing is another simple tool, but powerful. The way this works is we can think of a box in front of us and we inhale for 4 seconds and we imagine the first part of the box, the square. Then we hold that breath for 4 seconds, the other side of the box, and exhale that for 4, and hold that for 4. Generally, this exercise is done about 3 to 5 times. And slowing the breath really helps signal safety to our nervous system. Even, 1 minute of this intentional breathing can help reduce our stress responses. Then we have the next tool, and this is a self-compassionate pause. A lot of people seem to be incredibly hard on themselves during stress. And self-compassion is not a weakness. It's an important part of emotional resilience. This short pause involves acknowledging this is a moment of stress. Stress is part of being a human. May I be kind to myself right now? Sometimes the way we speak to ourselves can either increase distress or help regulate it. And our last tool is a micro reset. And this is a very quick nervous system reset that people can do almost anywhere. So what we do is we're going to drop our shoulders, relax our jaw, and slowly exhale. And bring our attention to one thing that we're grateful for. This takes less than 30 seconds, but it interrupts our stress patterns and helps the body slow down. And next slide. So when do we seek support? It's important to recognize when additional support may be helpful. If symptoms are persisting or impacting work or relationships, affecting our sleep, causing emotional overwhelm, or leading to disconnection and numbness, it may be time to seek support. Sometimes people may wait until they're completely burnt out before reaching out. But that support doesn't need to be reserved only for crisis. It's more so as a preventative measure. Next slide. So how can PsychHealth help? At PsychHealth, we provide trauma-informed and evidence-based psychological support, which includes individual counseling. We have a lot of resources on our website and practical well-being tools through our PsychHealth app. Our focus is to help people feel supported, understood, and equipped with the right practical strategies. Next. How PsychHealth can help for organizations. We offer EAP programs, confidential counseling, manager support, critical incident response, mediation, and supporting mental health in workplaces is not only beneficial for well-being, but it also improves communication, culture, retention, and overall functioning within the team. For anyone wanting to access PsychHealth at any point in time, we have a few different pathways, which is through self-referral via the website, through our app, or manager referrals, and our number as well. You can call our 1-800 number at any time. We aim to make support approachable and easily accessible, hence why the many different pathways of accessing. This is our PsychHealth Wellbeing app. We have a range of different tools that you're able to use, a range of different activities like gratitude journal. We have mindfulness, different videos that you can watch, resources at any time. Next. Yeah, these are the and these are the things that the app has and ways to download the app. Alex, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. Look, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. If following this, we will send out a newsletter to all the EAP managers, and it'll have obviously a recording of today, but also download instructions, and all the contact numbers for your convenience. So, look, moving into a time for questions. While you're busily scribbling away in message, I was interested, Theo, in the level of community support that was relevant to helping people through trauma. So I'd be interested in hearing from the people in attendance today. Is that something you want us to look into a little bit further and find out? Because what we've been talking about today is very much individual supports and individual assistance and techniques. But if you are interested in us looking at techniques for getting that community support going, let me know. But yeah, over to you for some questions.
Question from Singapore. For burnout, how do individuals identify or notice the burnout way before it was diagnosed by professional as burnout? You pick up yourself. How do you notify that? How do you know what sign?
How do you identify burnout? Is that the question?
Yes, in the early stage before you go chronic.
Theo?
Yes. So it's again it's person to person, but we can generally refer to those symptoms that we spoke about earlier in terms of, feeling emotionally overwhelmed or irritability, difficulty concentrating, constantly feeling on edge, or those emotions of numbness, for example, or avoidance. That's when you generally start to look at speaking to someone, and I guess just implementing some tools. That's all you'd require at that stage.
People who actually slowly go into burnout might not notice such thing. They just take it day to day. But how is that things that you can start to identify, or you look at it, when people go into this situation, they realize themselves.
Yeah. I guess it's a period of self-discovery where you kind of like you come to a point where you realize that I need some help to me. So you may not be, as what I say, right? You may not be self-aware, but if you start to say, "Oh, I cannot sleep at night. I've been thinking too much, and I get very jittery." For example, when someone asks me to do something, at what stage do you like suddenly have that awareness, or someone around you? In that case, right? If the person is not aware, maybe your colleague around you says that, "Hey, look, recently you have been having such a behavior. Maybe there's something that we can, help you or something like that." So it's about trying to self-diagnose that I'm getting on the edge or feeling on the edge, and therefore I may need help. Yeah. How do you identify some of these possible symptoms, even though it's individual?
Yeah. What if it's just a period of frustration, or are you going into burnout? Or it's just going to be a 3-month frustration, or you're going to go into a burnout?
If I might just jump in there. Look, from my experience, and I'm not a psychologist, but from my experience in this business so far, is that the earlier the better. Don't wait for things to get critical. Don't wait until you're so anxious that you can't turn up to work, or that you're not functioning properly. Upstream is better. Reach out. It's just a conversation. It's free. It's confidential. So just reach out nice and early. Have a chat to Theo. I mean, Theo talks about tools and resources, but until you've spoken to her, you don't know what those are yet. So earlier rather than later.
So I guess the thing is once you have even like self-awareness that, oh, maybe I'm a bit too much stress, I cannot cope, better call the helpline.
But how many people have this self-awareness?
You can't sleep anymore. Yeah.
No, can't sleep is very common now.
I didn't quite catch that last question.
I guess the case is that if a person is not even aware that you are having a burnout symptom, for instance, there's no chance that he or she will be able to reach out to anybody to help. And then maybe by the time the person is already too stressed and really burnt out, it may be too late. So is there a way to identify early? Whether from a person, him or herself, or from a close colleague around that person that had put forward a suggestion. I think you've been under too much stress. Maybe you should talk to someone, kind of a way of preempt a burnout before it happens.
Look, it's a very good point, Chin Young, and look, most of our clients, in fact, all of our clients are wonderfully responsible for the mental welfare of their people, their staff. And yes, we do get managers calling us or emailing us saying we would like to extend support to this particular individual. So absolutely, if you see someone in your work environment who you think could do with some support, obviously talk to them about it. But yes, you can extend their support to us on their behalf. Yes.
Right. I guess there is this the EAP allows the manager maybe even to suggest someone to go and approach the helpline. And then therefore, if the contact is made, if they come back and say, "Hey, sure, quite all right, you can cope with it well," then okay, at least you free up your mind and say that, "Oh, I'm not having such a bad situation," so to speak. Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Do we have a chat function?
We do have a chat function. I'm monitoring it. unless I'm not doing it properly, I can't see any messages.
Okay.
But all right, well, look, we're coming to the end of our session, our time. So again, I'll just remind you that this recording will be available for those who came in a little bit late. And for any colleagues who you think might appreciate this, we'll be circulating the recording in the newsletter tomorrow afternoon, I think, fingers crossed. But thank you for attending today. Thank you, Theo, for presenting. It was wonderful. We look forward to seeing you all again next time. And until then, bye for now.